Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, the old city forces unveil their true power, devastating Edaran defenses on the new city's fourth and penultimate level. With tens of thousands of lives at stake, Meridia must face the cruel sacrifices of war. Next on the Seventh Valkyrie. Carried crashing down 100 feet onto the fourth level, as the Thwarp horde began to press forward again. Lucky, stupid lucky girl. As Meridia pulled herself up onto the street and then immediately set to risking her life climbing among the wreckage for any other survivors, that phrase echoed in her head. Lucky. Caught out, tricked, fooled, outthought, outfought. The only reason you're alive is because of luck. Stupid. Meridia hung down beneath the bed frame, jammed into the earth. But the arm that she had seen poking from the rubble was just that, an arm. Meridia climbed up once more from the wreckage, standing to survey the battlefield. Beneath them, the dust of the walls collapse, the darkness, both real and unreal, and the dimmed sound made it nearly impossible to track what was happening at the base of the stairs. But against the scattered breaks and the unearthly quiet, she could hear commands and cries in Thwarp languages, beginning to overwhelm anything she heard coming up in Edaran. The severed men were finally dying, and the remnants of the Edaran force were dwindling even as they tried to retreat up into the stairways. Meridia had faced Thwarps and beat them before. Edaran had conquered the Freelanders, Apostolos had fallen. It was always possible to win, but in the face of a black blade that could tear down your city around you, how could you possibly fight back? Over on the bridge, the fighting was closer than it had been. With an earthly green glow, the mountains seemed to stretch out to meet the Edaran construction. The bare-bones force she had left there still fought to slow their progress, but they would need reinforcements if they were going to stop the bridge from connecting. Meridia laughed darkly at herself. Reinforcements? From where? Commander! Remnants of the fourth floor force are falling back up the stairs. The Thwarps are behind them. They're pushing. Meridia took a deep breath in. How was the evacuation going? There are still many thousands making their way out of the city. They're moving as quickly as they can, but it's slow going. The roads can only hold so many people at once. Do we have estimates? Someone said the evacuation is about half complete. But we can't be sure. Maybe that's an old estimate. Even 1% left is too much, Corporal. A strange sense of peace came over Meridia. Thank you for your update. Tell the embankment commanders to scuttle the remaining stairways. We'll hold them here as long as we can. He paused, then saluted, and ran off as fast as he could. She glanced beyond him, to where a half-division of stragglers ran up at double time, all that was left of their reinforcements. But as she scanned their faces, she realized that she'd been wrong to call them stragglers. Among the crowd, she saw men who had been there with her on the water, shared the battles on the docks, and among the dozens of others who she had not yet shared battle, she saw eyes alight with quiet burning fires. Not a single one was clean. Their shirts and their weapons were covered in blood. They were burned and missing hair and teeth. Some were tightly bound up in bandages and still bleeding through. And yet to a man they stood, unwavering even in the face of the collapsed wall ahead of them. Meridia nodded. These were men worth dying with. Protectors of the light. Here we hold. Archers, on me. Reinforcements to the stairs. I don't want cowards. I saw 10 of them hurl themselves off the walls in the face of the threat we stand against. She began to walk towards the stairs. I challenged some of you to stand with me, and to those of you who made it here, and all you who joined them, I offer my heart, my light, and my loyalty. They parted around her as she began to walk through them, taking her position at the top of the staircase. And to those of you who have stood with me tonight, now I will fall with you. We will all die tonight, holding this staircase to the very last man. But we do not die in vain. We die for every man, woman, and child who our military failed on 4 levels of this city. I do not place this blame on you. Those who condemned us to this punishment lie dead already. But I will not pass on that failure to our people. We will bleed for every step. We will die for every inch. And if your time has come, you spit in the face of the darkness and you keep killing them. They will give you no mercy, they will give you no quarter. But every second we hold, a family survives and we will live on through them. From the outsides and the back of the formation, a half-dozen men turned and ran, but Meridia just watched them go, and then turned back to the staircase. The rainbow lights of the thwarp advance had already made their way halfway up to the 5th level. Archers! Fire at will on the horde! Meridia drew a bow, but her shoulder spasmed. She was cramping up. No time to focus on that. With a roar, she snapped the bow over her leg, drawing her twin blades. The rest of you, with me! Lireshka Brin! From both ahead and behind, the call went out. Protein! With each call and response she sent echoing out through the tunnel. Even over the sound of the enormous Thwarp army, Meridia's heart began to beat slower, steadier. As her reinforcements merged with the remnants of the retreating force, Meridia put a hand out to exhausted men, shared fleeting moments of support with scared soldiers, and consulted officers as she moved towards the front battle line. In time, every soldier had to face the eternal darkness, and with both blades in her hands, Meridia felt a strange sense of peace. With what she knew might be her final battle cry, she lifted her voice. Mirashkafrin! Meridia roared, and then with a style that was still unfamiliar and yet strangely intuitive, she pushed to the front of the battle, taking the tip of the formation and diving across the distance between them, leaping into the Thwarp horde. And then she was in it, dancing like she had danced with the false wolf on the wharf, imitating his effortless flow through the battlefield as she opened up the Thwarp front line for the reinforcements to flow into. With the two armies crashing together in the tunnel, the air soon grew sticky and thin and hard to breathe, and the crowds erupted into a clamor of light and reflection so loud, Meridia practically hoped for the return of the Black Blade. There were cuts and bruises and wounds along the way, but Meridia slid up and down the bloody stairs as she fought, and behind her, crushing the dead thwarps beneath their advance, the Edarans gained ground. But it was hard fought and hard won. There was no give in the Freelander men who she dueled with, and even with all her ferocity, every kill sent to the Edarans behind her was replaced by another stern face. The Thwarp horde had been whittled down to its true warriors as well. Meridia's brief foray back into the Edaran formation gave her a break to scan the battlefield and glimpse the tattooed twins, the ones who had protected the Black Blade. They towered half-head above the men around them, and as Meridia met their gazes, their eyes glowed green, braids floating in the air behind them as they fizzed with power. Suddenly, a call went out in some other language. Meridia flinched and then instinctively threw herself 3 steps up the stairs as spires of earth punched through the tunnels from all sides. The hair was still back up on her neck as she scrambled across the stairs on all fours, dodging another burst of the erupting spires that came from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, punching up through flesh and bone and armor with equal ease. You could read the emergence points of the spires by the churn of the stone as it responded to the thwart's power, but only at the last possible moment. As Meridia fled up the stairs, her entire self was reduced to a frantic, scrambling, stumbling rush, reacting entirely on instinct as the men she passed were punctured and smashed to bits under the crushing onslaught of the twins' power. It was far too late to save them. Any moment of hesitation would have just doomed her as well. To the archers who had guarded the top of the stairs, the eruption of stone spires lasted only a dozen seconds or so. A dozen seconds that crushed the organized force in front of the Thwarp army and left their acting commander scrambling on all fours up the stairs, eyes glazed as the stone spires slowly began to recede, like the jaws of some beast slowly opening after crushing its prey. "Commander?" Someone shouted, but it was all that Meridia could do to keep stumbling forward, eventually regaining her feet and striding past the archers out onto the landing. "Commander! Commander, orders!" "The city is lost. Fall back. Flee. Save yourself, save anyone you can." Meridia began walking. "Commander Firebow!" Another archer had shouted. Meridia stopped and looked back over her shoulder. He had lifted his fist, bow in hand, and now held it over his chest. One by one, the rest of them joined in the salute. "We wouldn't be here without you. Whatever happens, you're a hero to all of us." Meridia turned the entire way back, meeting the eyes of the men who remained. With tears in her own eyes, she slowly raised her own fist in salute. But as she raised her voice to speak, to rally them with one last call to survive, her voice felt strangely far away. And so did her scream of warning, and so did her anguished cry as the stroke of midnight erupted from the tunnel, severing even that little moment of solace and unity in the face of so much death and so much failure. And finally, as those loyal soldiers turned to a spilling mass of screaming, cursing, desperate flesh, Meridia broke, turning and sprinting for the gates as fast as she could, abandoning the wreckage of the tunnel and the soldiers on the bridge as she used the last of her strength remaining in her legs in a single-minded rush towards the 5th floor embankments. She would jump them and then she would find a place to slip out of the city. Or she would ditch her light corps clothes and vault the wall and live the rest of her life in the woods, or maybe just kill herself and end it all right now. At the midway point of the 5th level, the embankments and fortifications had come up. The stairways had been scuttled, filled with burning rubble and overturned wagons and bright burning phosphor lamps. Beyond them, the mass of people leaving the city was still backed up too far, but it was smaller than it had been. As a force of habit, Meridia began to form a plan to hold the defense. If they scattered, no, that was playing right into the Thwarp's strengths in 1v1 combat. If they held their defenses, no, then they'd be cut apart. If they fled, they would draw the horde onto the civilians. The civilians were fucked anyway. And against it all, Meridia couldn't hear her breathing anymore, or the slam of her boots onto the stone, and when her aching legs finally cramped up from the exhaustion of hours and hours of non-stop combat, she crashed silently to the ground, a dozen yards in front of the embankments. Soldiers came to grab her, and there was a medic asking a dozen questions and preparing medicine, but they all sounded muffled, and there were so many that Meridia couldn't keep track of them all. They were all asking her what had happened, asking for orders, asking for a situation report, but all Meridia had in her was to point towards the bridge. And like she had summoned it, another stroke of midnight erupted across the landing, tearing out from the tunnels across the line of homes and storefronts, sending them collapsing in on themselves, crashing to dust. The torches began to catch light, and slowly the rubble of the homes began to burn. But the Black Blade wasn't finished. There was another, and another, and another stroke of midnight slicing across the last remnants of the Edaran riverside embankments. And then from the shimmering darkness came the Queen of the Black Blade, the wielder of oblivion, the Nightmare. She emerged first from the darkness of the stairway, a single silhouette of ultra-black against the night sky, like a shifting hole in the world where the Black Blade and its wielder had been. Logically, Meridia knew that somewhere buried at the center of that power, there should have still been something human. That was what they were taught, that all thwarps could be killed no matter how powerful. But as the man next to her breathed, Apostolus, Meridia had all but given up. From around the Nightmare, that ultra-black began to emanate out and swallow the light. Of the thwarps across the bridge, of thwarps still arriving on the 5th level, of the torches and lamps all along the Edaran streets, of the fires of the burning homes that grew larger by the moment. That unforgiving dark even began to swallow the light of the stars, and as Meridia watched, one by one those burning pinpoints faded in the face of the Nightmare's terrifying power. The bridge was nearing completion. It would be mere minutes before the thwarps had unfettered access to the entirety of Rene, and they would take what they could use and burn the rest. The structures, the animals, the people. There would be no surrender, no peace, no negotiations. The old city would cleanse the new. Exactly what Yosin had wanted to do on the other side of the river. All around Meridia, the torches flickered in the encampment, and then their light began to fade too. The Black Blade had seen them, and with each step it took forward, the yawning darkness expanded, aiming to consume. Silence fell on the last line of Edaran defense, and in all the faces turned to her, Meridia saw fear, desperation. They were searching her white cloak for any trick she had up her sleeve. That was what they were taught to do, to look to the strongest among them, to the Light Corps, to their leaders when all seemed lost. And somewhere deep inside herself, Meridia searched for whatever strength and defiance she had left. Even after everything that night, she could still feel something deep inside herself aching to stand. Pushing away one of the medics, Meridia stood, facing the Nightmare, who advanced steadily and silently through the night. Where the wielder of the Black Blade stepped, the fires went out, and behind her that darkness continued to swallow the sky, faster now and faster. One by one, the ultra-black devoured every point of light dotting the clouded heavens above, until all that remained was one. A weak, fading, shimmering point in the sky. The last flickering light above Nightmare's empty silhouette. But as the Nightmare's power crawled out onto the street and silenced the flames around the Edaran embankment, sending the last of the Edarans into darkness, the night's last star refused to fade. Out in the darkness, the wolves howled, long and clear, rising above the Nightmare's silence. They were joined by the calls of the street dogs out in the night, and then the sound of the war dogs and the family hounds that called out from beyond the walls. And then soon the haunting song of the wolves from the mountains beyond the old city and the new all joined in. Their mournful melody caught on the breeze, rising in a great chorus until a sound from another world echoed across the city. Something deeper, more powerful, more beautiful. A howling song to the fading moon and the dying light of the sky. At the howling of the wolves, the wind shifted, and high above the moon shone through the clouds, bursting through that unearthly dark onto the outer wall of the city. And as the smoke there faded, the night's last star emerged in shimmering armor. The Iron Wolf of Edaran had been listening. Hey there! If you're hearing this, it means you're listening to the public version of this episode. And I appreciate you taking the time and your interest in the series. It really helps the algorithm, it helps us grow. But if you are enjoying the show, maybe take a look over at our Patreon. We have uncut versions of the early episodes, access to new chapters before they're released for the general public, and you can shape the future of the series by deciding on new merch drops, bonus content, and more. You can get started for free at patreon.com/Seventh Valkyrie. That's patreon.com/7THVALKYRIE. Hope to see you there.